was like, no, I'm going to do something better. If you don't tell your wife tonight, I'm going to tell her tomorrow.
I'm Trey Tucker, mental health therapist, and this is Rugged, where we make your 20s and 30s legendary. You're going to get leadership tips and healing trauma tips today with my guest, Tony Miltenberger. He served 14 years in the military. He's an executive coach. He served as a pastor. He's one of the wisest people I know, and he's got awesome stories. So let's dive right in. Tony, your background is fascinating, so much variety. Help me with just, you start where you want to start in your story, but then I want to know, where did you get the passion to help people through their trauma as well? I know your backstory leads into that.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how things come together in what seemingly unconnected ways to be really connected together. I was enlisted in the Army Reserves in 1998, and I had 14 years serving in the Army, and I was so thankful for that time. And when I was deployed from 04 to 05, my eyes really got opened to what happens when people kind of run into trauma, when they run into things. And one of the things that I began to realize during COVID was that my wife and I were on our second walk for the day, because that's what we did during COVID. We walked a lot. Yep. And we looked at each other and we walked some more. We're on our second walk for the day. And I looked at my wife and I said, babe, we've been here before. I've been here before. And she goes, yeah, we were here this morning. And I was like, no, not like physically we weren't, but like emotionally, I've been here before. And she goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, COVID reminds me so much of being deployed. And she was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, just, when you're deployed, there's something that happens. You don't know what every day is going to hold, but you don't know what's going to be put on you, and you don't know how you're going to have to respond. And so it's prolonged stress that has no clear ending, that has no clear antidote, that has no clear resolution. And I began to realize that prolonged stress in our lives turns cracks into canyons. Now, a crack is anything in your life that you can normally step over, that you can normally ignore. I see it a lot in marriages, especially with soldiers, is that one of the things that happens is if you have a marital issue prior to the deployment, during the deployment, it will blow up. It acts as a magnifying glass. But then here's the gift that I didn't plan on, is that you can step over a crack, but you could get lost in a canyon. But the gift is that you can explore canyons in ways that you could never explore cracks. And so if you're willing to kind of let the stress of the moment magnify the situation, and then decide to spend real time exploring what's happening internally and externally and relationally, then all of a sudden what happens is you get this incredible gift to look at who you are in a brand new way. Wow. And that's really when I started doing this deep dive into the trauma work, as you kind of mentioned.
So many questions. First one, it hits me just thinking about clients that I've worked with in the past. What percentage of clients would you say you've worked with that are willing to go explore the canyon versus, I don't want to deal with the pain, I just want to keep on numbing?
A percentage would be hard. I would say the majority of people want to deal with symptoms rather than wounds.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, hey, can we just put a Band-Aid on this? Or oftentimes I do a lot of executive coaching, and I'm not a licensed therapist. I think that's important to say. I have a lot of experience in pastoral counseling and executive coaching and in Army training. So that's just full disclosure on that. I think I have my own counselor who's a licensed psychologist who's I go see every month, and I have for 10 years. Would not trade him for anything in the world. If you're in over your head, go get help. That's my number one recommendation to anyone. But the people that I work with, the thing that they want is they want things to feel better. And oftentimes we think that feeling better is about fixing a symptom rather than becoming intimate with the wound. And so we always start with the symptom, I would say 90% of the time. But in order to get to real health, as we have to get to the wound and begin to really learn the edges, the intricacies, and the intimate parts of that wounding.
And when you start with the symptom, what helps somebody move into willingness to actually get to the wound?
I think it's one of the questions that I often ask is, when is the first time that you felt this way?
Mm,
And I'm sure you've asked that question numerous times in your professional career as well. But when you can get to that question and you can say, okay, well, let's go back further. Let's go back further. When is the first time? And then all of a sudden, what you get is you begin to realize that like this is a part of who they are, hardwired.
mm,
One of the things that I just really believe is that all of us deal with what a lot of people call little t trauma, right? And it's trauma that's not malicious in intent, right? Rather that would be more like big T trauma, but little t trauma is this wounding that happens usually somewhere between the ages of 4 and 12. It's not malicious in intent, but it becomes a lens at which we look through life. And
mm,
so mine, for example, just to give you some handles for it,
mm,
when I was 4 years old, my parents had unplanned twins.
mm. Wow.
I'll never forget the day they were born. I love those kids. They're amazing. They're now grown adults by a lot. They have their own kids, but the twins are great. I would not trade the world for my brother and sister. But at 4 years old, I went from being the youngest to the middle and watching now in hindsight, I could say this, watching my parents learn how to go from two kids to four.
Mm,
And in the midst of all of that, just trying to feel like I didn't matter, right? And that's my wound. My wound is I didn't feel seen.
mhm,
And so at 4, my parents have unplanned twins. At 8, my parents end up getting divorced. At 10 and 12, they both get remarried. And so there's a narrative in my mind that is not anyone's fault, but is very true for me
mm,
that I didn't matter. And now my parents and I have had very healthy conversations around that in hindsight, and that's certainly not their narrative, but somewhere along the way, that became the impetus of a lot of who I am. That's a lens at how I see the world. And so if you want to get me really fired up, one of the ways to do that is to kind of ignore me or bully me or any of those things. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, you want to go? Let's go. Right. Like I'm going to show you who I am. Right. Like that's the deal though. But and here's what I've learned, right, through all of these hours of coaching and pastoral counseling, like all of these hours of this has kind of come together that everyone has something like this.
mm.
Right. And theologically, if you're someone who looks at that lens, we would call it the epistemic consequence of sin. More plainly spoken, we would say the world is broken. And I believe that this is the consequence of that brokenness in the world.
Mm. I mean, yeah, it doesn't matter if someone's a Christian, an atheist, or any other religion in between. I've never heard anybody try to argue back against the statement of, yeah, the world's broken. The world's not what it's
Mhm.
supposed to be. So I'm glad you said the part of your story you said about through no one's fault, your wound became this because we all have, I'd say a lot of men have that wound of not being seen or mine is like not being good enough, but also a mixture of not being seen. But so much on social media that we see right now, it's training people to blame somebody. It's like, here's your wound and here's who you need to cut off because you have this wound. I'm like, no, like in what universe do you have perfect parents and perfect friends
That's
that
right.
you're just never going to come out with any scars?
Yeah, so I have a 19-year-old son who's an amazing young man, and as I was putting together my work around this topic, I had the opportunity to chat with him about his wound. And if you don't have any teenagers, one of the things I recommend is do it in the car where they're strapped in. There's nowhere they can go.
They're going at high rates of speed so they won't jump out.
That's right. That's right. And it also helps that you don't have to make eye contact. It feels a little less intimate, a little less scary, right?
Right.
And so you're sitting shoulder to shoulder, and we're driving down the road. We're talking about. I said, "Hey, son, I'm doing this work on wounding and all this stuff, and I was curious if you think that you could put your hand on your wound, right?" And he was like, "Well, what's that mean?" And we talked about it a little bit more, and eventually, this is what he said. He said, somewhere along the way, Dad, I felt like if I didn't act a certain way, you didn't love me.
Mm.
It was
Wow.
heartbreaking,
Oh.
right? Now, here's the thing. My wife and I would not say that that was true for us. But here's what happened. At 8 years old, I took a new job that caused me to live in a fishbowl. I was a lead pastor at a church.
Mhm.
And I told him, it's very important for my work that you stand here and behave.
Mm. Wow.
And that was it. And our housing situation was tied directly to my job. And so there was a pressure that not intentionally, no malice, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
is that all of that just kind of laid at him. And so he was 8 years old when this happens. We moved to a new community. I become the lead pastor. I take on a new role. We immediately live in a fishbowl. And along the way, he hears this message that he has to um, perform in order to receive love. And so his wound is that he, if he's not, that we pressure him in order to receive so that he can perform in order to receive love. And so it's this kind of fascinating, it's this fascinating thing. He became a senior in high school. He's applying for colleges, and I'm asking him how his college applications go. And then he lashes out at me one day in the dining room and kind of yells at me. He's, "Dad, stop pressuring me." And I was like, "Bro, I'm just asking. Like, I'm just asking." But here's what happened. I bumped up against his wound.
Yep.
And just like people bump up against my wound, and marriage is just really two broken people bumping up against each other's wounds. And so one of the things that I try to tell people all the time, if you're not sure what your wound is, use this tool called the emotional intensity scale. And there's been various versions of it over the years, but my kind of version is on a scale from 1 to 10, anytime your emotional intensity spikes above a 6, it's always more about you than it is the other person.
Mm.
Now, here's what's crazy, and Trey, I think you know this, is that that emotional intensity can be good or bad,
Sure.
right? And so if I'm driving down 75 and somebody cuts me off and I decide to tell them that they're number one and use every word that I know, then is that about me or that about them? Well, of course it's about me, right? Because what's my wound? I want to be seen, right? And in that moment, I don't feel seen.
Yep.
Right. But it could also go the other way. I have two incredible boys. They both play football, middle linebackers. And let's say one of them picks six, takes it to the house. And then I go full blown Midwestern dad on the sideline. I'm high fiving everybody. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. My emotional intensity spiked above a 6. Why? Because I feel seen.
Yes, sir.
Right now, and so those are some of the cues, right? As we think about our own life and we think about how we lean into these things, the more that we're willing to pay attention to that emotional intensity, then all of a sudden we can begin to see that's the edges of our wound. That's how we show up in the world. Now, the other side to that, which is incredible, is that on the other side of your wound is almost always your greatest gift. And so while my wound is that I want to be seen, my greatest gift is I have this incredible ability to see people.
Mm-hmm.
And my son's wound of like, hey, pressure in order to, performance equals love. His greatest gift is that he is one of the most responsible leaders I've ever met at 19. He's just a great dude. Right. And he's kind of, and that's the way it works. So if you're not sure what your wound is, then ask the people in your life, what's my greatest gift? And it gives you a really unique way to get some honest feedback, as you like to say, no fluff feedback, right? On how you show up in the world. And then you can really begin to learn the edges of the wound.
Now that's useful on at least two levels, obviously helping you find your own wound. And it gives, especially men, a question that can help bond us together a little better, because we keep hearing about this male loneliness epidemic. And, I would argue different directions on that. But I do think men don't know how to get beyond the surface level with each other a lot of times. But a question like that, if you phrase it in different ways based on the friend you're around, that really could help somebody, especially groups of male friends, to move at least one step deeper with each other.
Yeah, I think one of the things that often happens with guys, and is I've seen this in Army units, and I've seen this in mostly male dominated executive teams, is that they have a hard time getting to vulnerability based trust.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so one of the ways to do that is to not talk about the negative things, which make us feel inadequate, but rather talk about the positive things that we're proud of.
Right.
Right. And so you can kind of backdoor this whole conversation in a way that feels safe, but is still incredibly productive to getting to that vulnerability based trust. And, I always tell every leader that the two things that you have to have are curiosity and empathy in order to get to trust. You have to be curious. You have to give people, grace. You have to give people a little bit of leeway. And then you have to have empathy to say, wow, I don't know why they're so upset. I wonder if I just bumped up against their wound.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me, moving back to your story again, you emphasized the military aspect of the roots of helping people find their wounds. Fast forward from there, what other aspects happened to you along the way that then led to you being passionate about writing this book and doing your own podcast?
Yeah, I'll say one of the crazy things that happened to me is I was serving in a large nonprofit, doing a lot of great work. I had 3 kids under the age of 10 at the time, and I decided to stop drinking.
Hmm.
It was a big moment in my life. I was working with a group at the church that I was at, and they didn't drink, and so I felt like in solidarity I shouldn't drink, and it wasn't until I stopped drinking that I realized I had a coping problem.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I just never would have guessed about myself is that I was using alcohol as a way to numb the pain that I was feeling for the stuff that bumped up against my wound.
Hmm.
And so when I stopped drinking, I actually didn't have any problems stopping drinking. Like that was actually a pretty easy thing for me.
Hmm.
It was my last drink was in my wife and I were in Europe at the time. We are in the Czech Republic, and I had my last beer over there September 9th. Almost, and it was 2014 at the time. And so here's the problem. When I came back to my real life, the pain that I was masking was still there. The pain of not feeling seen, of performance, of all of the things that are just a part of who I am. And what happened next is probably the thing that changed my life forever. And is I met a girl at work, and she was a single employee. She's a great human. She was did the Jesus stuff just like I did, and we started talking about work stuff, and then we started talking about non-work stuff, and then the next thing you know, I was in the throes of a full emotional affair. And Trey, one of the things that I will never ever forget is this emotional affair happened really fast, and it was very um, like it just kind of came on us really quick. And so we're probably 30 days into this relationship, but we're texting in the morning, we're texting in the evening. I'm hiding things from my wife at this point in time. I'm in a bad way. I describe it as often as like it felt like we were two drunks at a bar telling each other we should stop drinking.
Yeah.
And the moment that saved my life is I walked into this other I had a group of guys who I met with at the time. I walked into this other guy's office. His name's James Keith Posey, lives in Alabama, great guy. At the time we were working together in Ohio. And I said, James Keith, I'm in a really bad way with this girl,
Hmm.
and I don't know what to do. I can't stop talking to her, and I feel like I feel lost, like I'm
Hmm.
drowning. And he said, Tony, I'm going to help you. And I said, great. Are you going to tell her to stop talking to me? You going to tell her to leave me alone? And he was like, no, I'm going to do something better. If you don't tell your wife tonight, I'm going to tell her tomorrow.
Wow.
And he saved my life that day.
Holy cow.
So I went home that night, and after the kids went to bed, I sat on the couch with my wife, and I told her that for the last month or so, I've been having an emotional affair, and began the process of realizing that I didn't ever have a drinking problem, but I've always had a coping problem. And it's actually shortly after that is when I began to really double down with my therapist, the same guy who I still meet with. And I began to wrestle with this idea that if you aren't dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions.
Mm.
So nobody ever, I didn't wake up one day and say, man, today is the day that I want to fall in love with a single girl at work.
Right.
Today's the day I want to ruin my marriage. Go team, right? Nobody ever says that.
No.
But what happens is for me at least, is that I got so distracted by what I thought I needed. It almost cost me everything that I had worked for.
Man, thank you for the gift of your vulnerability, because I'm sure that's still not easy to tell, even though you probably told it many times.
I wish I could. The shame is a lot less now than it is then. Than it was then, right? Like the shame initially, that shame monster is huge and it's a bear to wrestle with.
Yeah.
But the here's the thing: secrets only have power when they're in the darkness. When you bring them to the light, everything begins to get a little bit easier. So thank you. And yes, it's still it's just not. I'm just not proud of it. Like I'm not. I wish I could tell you that I had this story that was, sunshine and lollipops, but unfortunately, I'm a messy human, like many of us.
I haven't met one yet who isn't. I've met the people who claim they're not, but I haven't met one who's actually not. What was the moment that made you decide to tell your friend? Was it James? Is that his name?
Yeah, James Keith.
Why tell him? Because so many guys and women too, they just wait until it all explodes.
I didn't see a way that I wasn't going to lose my kids. And so I knew that if I kept going down this path, right, that if we ever met outside of work, that there were going to be events that took place that I was never going to be able to come back from. And those events would come with consequences, and those consequences would be directly connected to my kids. And so, at the time, I just couldn't. My life was too public in the role that I was in at the church I was at. And I knew that I was going to lose everything. Like, it was just like one of those things where I could see enough to see that it was playing out. And we both knew that what we were doing was wrong, right? Me and this other person, like we had deleted each other's numbers, but it was too late. We were already kind of in this cycle of like using, so to speak. Like I had her number memorized at that point in my life. Yeah. I could delete her number, and then like we knew what we were doing was wrong. I could feel that conviction on me. And yet I was like, man, I don't know how to get out of it. And so it was this, the weight of that, instead of trying to deal with it myself. And again, I would say this is, I felt comfortable talking to James Keith because we had already spent so much time talking to each other. So I know a lot of guys who I talk to now, they don't have friends who they talk to when things aren't good. Or when are good. And so they have no one to talk to when they're not good.
Right.
And so this goes back to this idea of the disciplines, is that if you don't have a group of people in your life that you can be brutally honest with, then you're never going to have somebody to be brutally honest with when you need them the most. Our mutual friend, Annie Downs, who we're both on the That Sounds Fun podcast network together.
Right.
She says that it's really okay to have a private life, but it's never okay to have a secret life. And so who are the people that know everything about you? And so still to this day, I meet with two groups of guys who are friends. They're not, they're just friends. They're just people who I walk with in life. And one of them I meet with every week, and the other one I meet with twice a month. And they're just guys who I want to be like. They're guys who I admire. They're guys who are walking in the same kind of walk that I desire. And so they're not connected to me in any kind of way, but other than just friendship. And I'm so thankful for those groups. They're kind of like an impromptu or an unintended support group.
Yeah, I love it. And I would assume that friends like that help you cope with your stuff rather than just trading out one distraction for another. Because that's what I was hearing you say in your story without really saying it, is you basically traded drinking for attention from a woman, just for the ultimate root or the ultimate need of coping.
That's 100% right. That's 100% right. And so this is now part, it's now part of my regular disciplines, right? So meeting with other guys, and you've probably read Pete Scazzero's work, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
Yeah.
One of the things that he gave me in the midst of this through counseling, I started reading his stuff, and I created this rule of life. And this rule of life becomes kind of this roadmap for me to say, hey, this is what it looks like for me to be the healthiest version of me. So it involves working out. It involves meeting with guys. It involves meeting with my counselor. It involves dating my wife. It involves all of these activities, calling my parents. Like I get down to it to the point where I can keep a scorecard on
Yep.
my rule of life. And then once a year, I take a day or sometimes a weekend and I create it, go back and I evaluate how I did. How did I do this year at going to the gym 5 times a week? How did I do this year at dating my wife at least once a month and getting away at least once a year? Like, how did I do at these things? And that data becomes a lot of how I look at and filter decision making so that I can be the healthiest, best version of me.
I love it. And in that process of becoming the healthiest, best version of you, what else has been helpful besides the therapy that you've been doing for 10 years? I know you're a pastor and have a relationship with the Lord yourself. Has that been a factor, I assume? And then have there been
100,
other factors too?
yeah, 100%. Here's the thing. I've learned that if I don't take good information in, I won't put good information out. And so I read my Bible every morning, and I read it with a whole bunch of guys on the YouVersion Bible app. I'm a big fan of it. And so there's about 19 of us. We're going through the New Testament this year. I pray with my wife every night. I pray over her. Right. And this has become a cheat code for me in a way that I could never have described before. And so every night before I go to bed, I make sure that my wife and I pray together, and I ask God to pray over her head and heart and to give me eyes to see her through your eyes. Right. Like, Lord, give me your eyes to see her. Because here's the problem is I know that I can be a resentful jerk and I don't want to be that guy. And so and then she prays over me. And so hearing my wife pray over me every night, and we rarely miss a night. If we're in the same house, we will not miss it. The only time we've ever missed is when I'm traveling or she's traveling. So those are a couple of key components. I mentioned the guys that I meet with. The gym is really important for me. I think, movement is medicine. I really believe that. And so getting to the gym, even if the workout is not a great workout or not lifting heavy weights or whatever it is, just movement matters. Motion changes emotion. And I believe that as well. And so, and then, kind of the other thing that I do is I take time to, John Mark Comer would call it sitting in solitude, but just like silence. Right. And so not reading anything. This year I got a sauna this year.
Ooh, hey.
And so I try to hit the sauna in just silence. Right. And I'll just sit there in the heat and sweat. And I'll do that at the end of the night. And if I'm feeling really adventurous, I might cold tub after that. And I bought a horse trough, and in Ohio, you can 9 months out of the year, it's cold enough, right? Like it's not, it's not overly complicated. It's not overly expensive. It's just simple ways that I try to maximize my emotional stability so that I can be the best version of a husband and a father. And so those are kind of some of the things that I don't negotiate on.
Gosh, you talk about discipline. I love the variety because it's all integrated between your mind and your relationships and your body and spirit and your spirit. So, I mean, well done. Well done. So
listen, I'm not perfect at it. Just it's a process. Like this is the ideal scenario. I always, and I challenge my coaching clients to do this all the time. What's your optimized version of you?
Yep.
Right. And for me, that's getting up at 5, spending an hour in the Word, going to the gym at 6, and then I got my first meeting at 8:30. So I have a little bit of morning time. Like, when those all things work, I'm a better human. I'm just better.
Yes. So in the book, tell me, what do you think, what's one of your favorite parts of the book that you really hope people get something out of?
My hope and prayer is that leaders, especially guys, will have the courage to take the time to look at their wound. Because I think one of the things that happens in the world today that we don't often talk about is we react emotionally instead of responding intentionally. And so in the book, I kind of just suggest that wisdom isn't the absence of wounding, but rather the intimacy with your wound. And I just kind of hope and pray that every person who picks up the book is willing to kind of lean in so that the edges of your wound doesn't scare you anymore. That you're willing to just say, this is a part of who I am. I accept it. And I am appreciative of it because on the other side of it, is the greatest part of who I am.
Man, I love it. I love it. Tony, you're an awesome dude. I'm glad to be in the fight alongside of you, and you're making a massive impact on so many different types of people. Tell people the name of the book, where they can get it, and the name of your podcast, and any other information on how they can find you.
Dude, it's just been so good. I can't believe how fast time has gone. You're so good at podcasting. Thank you for having me on. They can find the book at wisdominthewoundbook.com. And the name of my podcast is a Follow the Number 2 Lead podcast. You can get that wherever podcasts are listed. I'm easy to find at TW Milt on Instagram. So any one of those places are probably a really good place for me to connect with. And if you're listening to this and there's anything I can do to help you, please don't hesitate to let me know. I believe in abundance mindset, and I really would be honored to help.
People, I'm telling you, he means that. He is warm and available and engaging, so he's a generous guy. So definitely take him up on that. And we'll put all the links to all the book and the podcast and the site, all that will be in the show notes as well. Tony, appreciate you.
Hey, likewise, brother.
Hey, thanks so much for being here today. Before you go, would you hit that subscribe button so that future episodes come right to you? Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.